Till, welcome to the show.
It's great to meet you. I'm looking forward to all of this.
When someone asked who I was recording with today, I actually found it very hard to describe you because you're a bit of a Swiss Army knife of a person. You're like a photographer who has a farm, but he's also in great shape, and you're in like rural Norway. So Till, how would you describe yourself?
I would probably not try to. Well, I think I can give you a bit of a backstory of all this to make it a bit more understandable. I grew up in the northern part of Germany in a small town called Wilhelmshaven. Nobody heard about it. Fair enough. Then through the early beginnings of strength training, I was very interested in being in a competitive gym when it comes to powerlifting and performance. So I moved to Hamburg to study biology, but I actually moved there because I wanted to get into a specific gym there. I have done my bachelor's in biology in Hamburg while training. Then realized I'm not a big fan of particularly big cities and noise, and especially not having much money in comparison to the rest of the people. So I was like, let's find a country where I can actually get some freedom with a low amount of money. So I moved to Vietnam for a year after that, bought a motorbike, and then just went to the gyms in Vietnam to get to know people, to then rent a flat through them, and then live in different cities in Vietnam for a year. Ran out of money, obviously. Well, I didn't run out surprisingly, but there's always an end to this. And then I figured out I look at countries where getting money with little work is as easy as possible. And it brought me to do a master degree in nutrition science in Denmark, because EU residents have the right to receive student payment. So you literally get a salary for being a student if you do work 11 hours a week. So if you fulfill that requirement, you end up with about 1,700 euros net every month for 11 hours a week. So I thought I'll just save up that money and then go to South America afterwards to get the freedom back. Well, I met my girlfriend in Copenhagen. She is Norwegian, and we were both ready to go to South America together based on the savings, which was then planned for March of 2020. It wasn't a particularly good time to travel. So we couldn't go to South America, obviously, and then thought, okay, we have cancelled the flat. We should go to Norway to stay in the family cabin around this area where we are now. We flew over, but I got rejected at the airport due to not being a Norwegian citizen. Then had to fly back the whole route in the same day, having to kind of couch surf for 3-4 months until the borders would reopen. And then we moved to the family cabin. From there on, it was pretty easy to decide that being here is also freedom, and we would look for a farm. The nutrition aspect may be explained to you now, and strength training and gymnastics, combining these two was always my thing. So I got to a fairly high level of strength, I would assume, comparably, after 13 years of being in the gym pretty much all the time.
Even from a young age, there's this desire for freedom, this desire to go out and have an adventure, break the mold of the normal 9 to 5. Where do you think that stems from?
I think I just really, really much dislike authority and rules. Not for the sake that I like to break rules. I wouldn't get to that idea on my own, I would say, but I don't like to get told what to do. And you are not having much chance of doing what you want to do if you don't have the bare financials. And if you are staying in cities, there's just like this cloud of societal expectations crushing you every day. So you have your etiquette on how to go to the supermarket, how to behave, how to interact with people. And in nature, or in the Norwegian mountains, it's a bit easier. there are no expectations of how you have to behave. So it's kind of always the mix of financial freedom and being free of societal expectations. And I think that was just innate from the very beginning.
So then you were in the family cabin for a year. What about life in that cabin made you think, hey, let's stay here for a permanent time?
The first thing is obviously that the societal expectations weren't there anymore. With not too many neighbors, you don't have to deal with that pretty much. And the family cabin is also situated right at the foot of the mountains/hills of the area. So you basically go out of the door and are in nature. You can just go with the dog for hours and hours without meeting people. You can go from fishing lake to fishing lake, get your own food, which is a big plus for me too. And in general, in Norway, there's a very high focus on outdoor life. You grew up in Scotland. You may know that, because I heard that it might be the only country that's comparable to the focus on the outdoor life. And that's something I never realized, because growing up in northern Germany, and generally in Germany, people aren't particularly nature people. And coming here, noticing that literally everybody either does or knows somebody that does fish and go hunt and pick berries. That's something terrific, I thought. And then obviously also the option to buy land here was a big contrast to other countries.
Are you an introverted person then? Because a lot of people, the life that you laid out just there, a lot of people would struggle with the lack of connection to people, but you seem to thrive under that.
It's hard to differentiate, I think. I don't know the exact definition of what being an introvert is. And I'm not sure if it exists either. It's just more of a distinction, I assume. But in general, all my life, I was very happy in my own company, and also together with animals. It doesn't mean that I am feeling miserable when I'm with people. And I do enjoy it. I don't have any issues being social. And I'm also not the guy that would sit in the corner in a conversation, in a group conversation. So I don't know if I'm particularly introvert, but if I would split my time, I prefer to be alone maybe 90% of the time, and then have 10% of actual communication with people. That is a bit more meaningful than the everyday conversation that you would have at an office. So I don't know. I couldn't say. I neither am full-on introvert or extrovert either. I mean, making YouTube videos, I don't know if you can still call yourself an introvert if you're sharing your life on a social media platform.
I think the definition would be, well, certainly anything that I've read is, if you're introverted, you restore yourself through time alone, whereas if you're extroverted, you restore yourself through time with other people.
Okay, well, if it doesn't exclude the joy of being with people, then I would consider myself introvert, yes.
So you've now spent a year in Norway. You decide you want to stay there. What's the process like behind buying a farm? Because in Scotland, for example, if you buy a farm, you're talking millions, because it's a whole business you're buying. You're not just buying the land, you're buying the crops that come with it, or the animals, etc. What's it like in Norway?
It is fairly different. In general, if you want to buy land here, you do need to have your citizen number, which includes full migration. So you either have to be employed here to prove that migration is valid, or, well, the regulations changed a little, but back then when we came here, I had to prove having financials to live on for at least 24 months. So I kind of...
Is that 24 months worth to live on in the bank?
Yes.
Just in cash. So that's
cash.
It's quite a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. I didn't have it, but kind of got around it with help from my parents. So you needed to prove that you have the amount of cash for the 24 months, and that you do have existing potential work relationships in the country, and have an address that you're living on right now. So you had to either rent or own anything already. These were the three main things for me, I think. Having a Norwegian girlfriend that I wasn't married to wasn't a help in that process.
And the farm that you chose to buy, tell us a bit about it. How big is it? Do you grow anything on the farm? I imagine it's quite difficult to grow things during the Norwegian winter.
Yeah, it's not too far off from the Scottish winter, I assume, at least at the height that we are at. But I think I didn't answer fully on the question before. In general, the farms here are often split up from the land that they once had. So in the early days, there were a lot of farms with about, let's say, 20 hectares. That was a pretty rough number, I would say. That was popular, which would include a bit of forest, grazing grounds, and growing space. But over the years, as in any other country, it centralized much more. So the farms that did continue farming bought up the land of the other farms around them, which then split the properties into smaller properties, and the majority went to one farmer. So there are very, very few existing large farms that actually produce milk and groceries here. These ones you don't necessarily want to buy if you are on the lookout for a budget-friendly solution, because you're speaking millions of dollars as in any other country. But there are loads and loads of farms that are having still these either 20 acres connected or a little less than that. And they do sell somewhere in between, depending on the condition of the buildings, in between 100,000 euros to 350,000, 400,000 euros. So not far off from a flat in any bigger city. And that's what we went for. We now have a farm which was sadly split up from it's not the original size anymore. It was 25 hectares, and now we have 2 hectares of land.
So we would call that in Scotland a small holding.
Yeah, it would be a small holding.
Yeah. A lot of people, especially in Britain, small holdings very romanticized because it's very self-sufficient. I guess it's what you're putting out there. But what are the downsides of small holding, farming, living that you have? Everyone sees the upsides of time in nature, time with the animals. But what are the downsides that no one else sees?
Well, in this country particularly, the downside is, well, we don't have animals, obviously. This farm wasn't used for 30 years. So we took over a small holding which hasn't been running for a very long time. So there's number one is restoration, and number two is building. And these small holdings have one particular disadvantage in Norway if they do not run agriculture. Then you do need to apply for buildings and changes of the buildings, like you would do for a regular house. And that's always a load of bureaucracy. Well, so it's number one, if it's not running on an agricultural business, it's a lot of applications that you have to go through. They cost a lot of money. And number two disadvantage of having a small holding is that it normally comes with buildings that need to be restored or at least maintained. And in Norway, maintenance, like any building material, is astronomically expensive. So it's just a huge commitment financially if you want to maintain things. These are the two main downsides of having a small holding. Otherwise, I don't see any, especially as we are close or in the proximity of a 300,000 people city within 30 minutes of taking a speedboat over the fjord. So I don't see any disadvantage, as people generally commute longer distances within the city than we would do to the city.
Is your commute to the city on a speedboat? That's so cool.
Yeah, it is on a speedboat, and it's not mine because I don't go to the cities, but my girlfriend does. So she works in the city, and then we would take about a 7-minute drive down to the terminal, down to the harbor, and then she would take the speedboat over into the city.
That's so cool. What happens in the winter though when it freezes? Can you?
Fjords don't freeze.
Oh, I guess because okay.
Too much current, too much salt.
Yeah. Wow, that is a cool commute. And I guess do you just hang about on the farm doing bits? What's your sort of daily routine when she's out working?
Right now, winter is a bit more tricky. In the summer, I've been pretty much spending all my time outside, building the greenhouse, fixing stuff on the barn, getting in the window, growing crops, all that kind of stuff. Right now, it is a bit more interior work in the barn. And also the money aspect. Obviously, social media doesn't make me anything. I do have a YouTube channel that generates maybe $350 annually. So having some stock footage revenue, Instagram doesn't make anything. So social media doesn't help. So there needs to be another source of revenue. And I got a governmental grant to build a company focusing on providing nature experiences / services. So we're building right now courses in log cabin building, regenerative agriculture, and foraging. So that's kind of like maybe 2 days a week, focusing on building that company. Then 3 days a week might be editing social media stuff, and right now 2 days a week is just labor on the farm. So we took down some silos that were impregnated with creosote, so it's like a kind of cancerous substance. So it's just getting this out of the farm and then fixing the gaps that you create by taking out such massive silos. So it's just carpentry in winter, carpentry, social media, and building the company.
Do you find it difficult to switch off in a way, maybe especially in summer when there's just an endless list of jobs? You know, the list of jobs is so never-ending that even when you're finished for the day, you know that there's still a bunch more things to do. Is it hard to just sort of draw the line and be like, okay, now I'm going to relax and sit by the fire or watch the sunset?
It doesn't bother me particularly with physical tasks. I do have that problem with everything I have to do in front of the computer. That stuff never lets me go. But if I'm building something outside, I don't have any problems just letting it be and go fish. In Norway, you have a mentality towards weather, which is quite strong. So let's say you have a mediocre weather 4 days a week, and you know the experiences outside and the relaxing stuff wouldn't be too nice. Then you're out anyways. And as soon as the good weather comes in, everything just gets left behind and you're in the mountains or fishing. So it's kind of easy differentiation between fun and work, because if the weather is particularly nice, you don't work.
yeah. It's quite interesting, actually. Going with the seasons is something that I kind of first came across when, obviously, in cycling, everyone would race all through Europe in the summer. And then a lot of people would go to Australia in the winter just to continually get the summer sun. And there was an Australian professional cyclist who lived in Andorra in the Spanish mountains. And he didn't go home to Australia for the winter, to get the sun. And he said it's very natural to, in winter, slow down. It's very natural to put on a bit of weight because that's what the weather's doing. All of this going with the season rather than this high octane chasing of the summer. And ever since I listened to that, I was like, that's such a good point, actually. And now when it comes to winter, especially because we're in the mountains now where it snows, it's just like that very acute little voice saying, just slow down. It's winter. It's like, it's fine. And I guess you're doing something very similar.
Yeah, voluntarily or not, especially.
Yeah, I guess you don't really have a choice when you've got 2 meters of snow outside.
Yeah, it makes things difficult. Let's say digging is not optional anymore. Neither is particularly long road trips because some roads are closed. So you're naturally staying around the farm. But the main thing that's different from the place that you're living to our place is that it's very dark here for very long. So on the shortest days, now that we have a little bit of mountain surrounding the farm, we may have 20 minutes of actual sun off the farm.
No.
Yes, like that's about how long the sun actually reaches the housing. And it's bright from about, I would say, bright from 10 to 2:30. So that's 4.5 hours each day. So that light restriction, that is really slowing you down. and make you do other things like skiing. Because if there's snow and there's a moon, then it's still bright enough to do stuff outside. But you're just not doing the jobs that you're used to, and you're also not going for particularly long hikes anymore. So it all shifts a little to different activities.
So this could be an ignorant question, but before electricity, those who lived in Norway and then had to face such long winters, did they just bunk down for the whole time it was dark? Because sure, that's a lot of time of inactivity.
Yeah, well, I can't particularly speak for these people, but what I can speak for is that winter has a very big charm for Norwegians. In general, as I said earlier, the outdoor life is highly valued here. So everybody's pretty much out skiing, just making a fire somewhere, boiling a little bit of coffee on a lake. Ice fishing is a very big thing. It's not about hunkering down, but it's probably just being more inside in front of the fire because of the cold, obviously. So in general, you spend more time inside, but you do use the remaining hours of light to do outside activities. Obviously, as in every society right now, pretty much everybody has to work during the bright hours. But if I would go farther back, I would assume that there was still outdoor activities, just nothing in regards to farming.
So do you just spend a lot of your day shoveling snow?
Depends. We are in Trøndelag, which is one of the counties, and we're pretty much in Norway. So there are some weather swings depending on the Gulf Stream and the closeness to the ocean. So it can vary a lot. We can get a meter 20 of snow a day, or have 2 weeks of plus degrees. This winter was particularly cold, but it wasn't so much snow. So I would say on the majority of winter days, I may spend an hour or two shoveling snow. But the property now is so big that we do have a snowblower, because it's an impossible task to shovel that snow. And we do not own a tractor, as that didn't come with the small holding. So then the options are fairly limited. But as we were living at the cabin there, I was shoveling, and I would say that a good part of the winter activities was shoveling snow, yes.
A snowblower is probably one of the most masculine tools known to man. We see them up and down the street that we live on. Just like, you know, when there's been a big dump of snow, and you can just hear at like 7 a.m. all the men getting really excited to go do their manly thing of snow blowing their driveway. It's nothing compared to what you do, but it makes everyone feel good.
But I have to be honest that our snowblower is not particularly manly, because I opted for an electronic version. So the gasoline aspect and the noise is missing. Still looks cool, but they would need some sound effects to that.
Just how cold is it getting in winter?
Well, it depends a little on the landscape. That means that the lower you are in the valleys, the colder it gets, because the cold just stays. And the cabin that we lived on was a little lower, so then it got cold to minus 30. Right now, the farm is only at 139 meters above sea level, and not at the very bottom of the valley. So we're going down to normally minus 14, minus 15 this winter.
Okay, so
a bit warmer.
I mean, cold, but not minus 30 cold.
It doesn't make a huge difference, to be honest. Like, in terms of your activities, I don't think it makes a big difference, because the only thing that gets uncomfortable with the cold climate is breathing, and that is as uncomfortable at minus 15 as it is at minus 30 to me. So it's fine. Like, compared to where I grew up, the humidity is much lower, and it is much less nasty outside when it is cold. So living at the Northern Sea in Germany, minus 2 degrees, slight wind and rain, or snow-ish rain, terrible. Like, it freezes you to the core. And here, minus 15 degrees, then I would put on 3 layers and put a big wool sweater on top.
Oh, wow.
Good.
Yeah.
So it's a very different experience. And I assume Scotland is equally as moist. So having a windy minus 2 degree day is kind of a bad thing to be outside.
Yeah. We were skiing this morning and it was minus 8. but because it's, as you were saying, it's like that dry air. So it's like -8 was completely fine. But oh my goodness, you had like 0 degrees and raining in Scotland. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it's I remember biking around in that slight rain, and then the moist is going through your gloves on the bike, and it's like terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Oh yeah. It's bad. It's bad. Tell me about fishing. So you obviously, I watched an amazing video of you going out fishing in the summer, and then you also spoke earlier about ice fishing. What sort of fish are you catching, and then is it enough that you can then not live off the fish, but there must be a sufficient amount of stock that you can, have a lot of fish for dinner and stuff.
Yes. Generally, rod catching isn't what you live off. If it is in fresh water, then you're normally going for trout or Arctic char. Yeah, that's like Norwegians are very limited with their freshwater catch. It's pretty much only about trout and salmon that goes up the river. Salmon has a very high prestige in this country, and so it's not much about eating. It's more about like the sport that I don't particularly understand that. But we do have fishing rides in 2 lakes here where I can use nets. So I'm going net fishing for trout and Arctic char, which is very much enough to supply our fish meals. Only from that, the fishing for trout has gone down here a lot. It's much less attractive to people than it has been 50 years ago, where it was actually part of supplying food. So the numbers of fish in these lakes are very, very high. It basically doesn't make a dent if I would take out 40-50 kilos of trout. It's like, really doesn't make any difference. And sea fishing, due to the current in this part of the fjord, is a bit complicated because you constantly, like, we only had a rowboat, so I constantly ended up 20 kilometers from where I actually started, and then fishing at the same time while rowing is kind of complicated. But you have pollock, which is fairly present around this part here. Also haddock. So the whitefish will be able to supply you. If you have a rod with like 3, 4, 5 hooks, you may be able to hook one pollock and on each hook. So you may be getting 30, 40 kilos of fish with one throw if you hit the swarm. So there's a lot of time where you don't catch anything, but if you do catch, then it's enough for a very long time. Next year, I'm going to try myself on some eel. Generally, Norwegians, they like the nice things, so the salmon fillet or having a trout. But if it comes to the stuff that's not as visually appealing, there's not much competition here. And I've been smoking the trout, cold smoking it, and I think the eel cold smoked is also going to be pretty nice. So yeah, fish is definitely not a problem here. And ice fishing in winter is more for the fun of it, because obviously I have been putting a net under the ice. That was quite a tricky thing. It did get me some fish, but it's not as much as you would have in an autumn day. So that's more sitting on the ice, having a coffee, fishing a little on the side.
How do you ice fish? Do you have to like cut a hole in the ice and then put like a rod in or a net in?
Yeah, you have an ice auger, so that's kind of a drill. So you drill in a hole, and you have a much smaller ice fishing rod, which is just like, let's say, 30 centimeters of plastic, where you would have often a blinking light on just above the hook. So it would blink in contact with water, and then through that attract fish, and you would use maggot as bait. So yeah, you're just hanging there, maybe a meter 50 under the ice surface, and having the maggots in the water. And it's mainly about numbers. So the more holes, the more rods you have out, the more fun it is.
What's the process behind catching eels? Is it similar to trout, or is there a whole different process behind it?
I have not done it yet. I have planned it for the coming year, because I know there's eel in the lake that we have just in front of the door. But I would assume it would be I'm not fully sure what's the English word for that, but it's sort of a static net that you fill with bait as well. Pretty much similar to crab cages, where you would just fill in a fish. The crabs would go in and wouldn't find the way out again.
I see. And hunting's a big part of life in Norway as well. Have you done much hunting? I
have just done my license last year. Kind of missing the one thing that's somewhat essential to hunting, and that's a gun. So it's not about the registration or the license there, but more about the money, because having a gun requires you also to have a approved gun safe. So you're looking at another maybe 1,500 euros, which is fairly expensive. So I kind of missed this hunting season. But a neighbor brought over a deer that he shot that I smoked, and so we got still our game meat. My father-in-law is also hunting a lot, so it's not a big deal. But I will start actively hunting next year. The thing there is, once again, I'm not a sports hunter. The trophy thing in fishing and hunting is not really mine, but getting food that I know has lived well and is probably more nutritious than what you can buy in the supermarket.
Obviously, you're hunting deer. Is there anything else that you're hunting? Is it mostly red or roe deer, or what is it?
Well, it's all of that. So you have the cheapest license you can buy is roe deer, obviously, because the numbers are very high. There is some red deer in this area, but it's fairly limited. So you maybe have for this commune, you maybe have 4 animals you can take out. They are just migrating farther north, as they are a bit more southbound, actually. But they do come over Sweden and then go back into the higher northern parts of Norway. And then obviously moose. Moose is also like the most prestigious deer hunt, I would say here. So yeah, moose and roe deer most likely.
Well, that sounds very much like Scotland then, just apart from the moose. But
yeah, no, but you seem to have insane numbers of deer, and also having issues with them damaging vegetation.
Yeah, that's
right?
correct. Like, do you guys have any wolves or any apex predators? Because there's none of that. We don't have any of that.
Norwegians have been historically very good at shooting everything in sight. So no. Unfortunately not. That's obviously why also in Scotland there are issues with the deer numbers. There's not enough hunting going on to balance out the actual predatory impact that you would have on the population. So we have an occasional bear, but as soon as they make it over the Swedish border, there is a hunting team of Norwegians on it. And, I'm not particularly fond of that behavior, but no, it's not much.
Tell me about your dog, who looks a bit like a bear, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, you get used to the size. It gets smaller every day. He's called Yuki. He's an Alaskan Malamute. And in general, very good guy to have around. These are very, very social and pack-oriented animals from the sledding purposes. Very good companion. He has just one flaw, and that's he enjoying to hunt. So in Norway, you have a mandatory leash period for dogs, which is going from the beginning of the reproduction season of the game, so from I think April to September. So in that time you need to keep your dog
always
on a leash by law anyways.
Wow,
always.
Interesting.
Especially in regards to being out in areas where there is domestic reindeer. It's obviously the indigenous population here that does the reindeer herding has the allowance to shoot dogs if they're going after the reindeer. So you prefer to keep your dog on a leash, especially he likes roe deer hunting. So he's coming back, but no. And in winter,
how long the lead needs to be? So could it be like a? So I saw on a video that you have quite a long lead. So he does just go about, but he's always connected to you.
Yes, I normally have him on. I think it's 15 meters, and most of the time I do not hold the lead, just so that I have the option to grab it quickly if he runs.
In winter, I've seen some pretty fun videos of him pulling you on skis. That must be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a very good helper when it comes to skiing. He is a Malamute, so he's more of the strong pulling dog, but not as endurant as an Alaskan or Siberian Husky that you would use for longer distances. So it's fast pulling if he's pulling, and at one point it's just getting tired. And it's the best thing, to be honest, to be two people when skiing, because he will always follow the front person. He's not particularly a leading dog. But if you do have somebody in front, then it's a constant motor. That's a very good thing.
Yeah.
And the sled dogs, their life is better if they do get the energy out pulling, following the genetic drive to just pull for a few hours and then being a very balanced dog afterwards.
Yeah. They're obviously pack dogs. They're used to working in teams. Do you find that he thinks that you're now his pack, or would you ever consider getting a second dog to keep him company?
I pretty much spend 24 hours with the dog every day. So due to the nature of my work, I can be with him all the time. I think that's all right. If people would have these dogs while not spending the time with them, I would consider having at least two. But it is much easier to do what I do with one dog only. Especially when it comes to road trip travels, it's much easier to have only one cage in the back of the car. Also, the pack behavior towards other dogs, of which there are plenty in Norway, can be a bit dominant, aggressive also. So it's just, life is easier with one dog for us as it is now. It would be just nice so that my girlfriend would also have a dog pulling in the winter on skis. But the disadvantages of that are fairly high for us. And I do very much enjoy the fact of how human focused he is. So that was the aim with having one sled dog. So he knows the pack is here. If we would have two, they would probably just be off hunting together. It's a bit easier for us as it is now.
So, at the very start of the conversation, you talked about your first love of powerlifting, and obviously you're in great shape at the moment. How do you stay in such good shape? Do you have like a home gym set up, or is it just a lot of wood chopping? Because there's a fun fact that I read ages ago, and it was the single activity to boost your testosterone the most was chopping wood.
Well, I don't know if I would believe that study, but they're probably just more of a placebo effect of being particularly manly while doing that. No, we do have a small village fairly close by, 15 minutes of driving, which has a gym. So I have been training for about 7 days, full body, for 10 years of my life. So it has been always a very high frequent, medium intense full body training in terms of powerlifting and the gymnastics part. Figured out that combining the farm chores that I have now with 2 strength days a week, just 2, it's surprisingly little, has been giving me progress in terms of strength that I never had from anything before.
Interesting.
So I do lift Tuesdays and Thursdays with a variation of cleans, deadlifts, squats, sometimes bench press. So it's just like, normally I have one strength focus on a leg exercise, so it would be the squat or the deadlift. I'll just put it to legs for now, and then the bench or pressing overhead day a week. And I do only train in supersets since the last 10 years. So I have 2 supersets of 5 sets each of 2 exercises twice a week, and that's bringing great progress. So just going to the gym 2 times a week is keeping the strength going in that regard. And then obviously carrying a lot of odd objects around the farm is it's helping a lot. because it trains stabilization muscles you wouldn't normally train.
That's so interesting. That is so interesting. I like that a lot. That combination between manual labor and strength training, you're actually seeing gains as a result of that.
Yeah, the less I train, the more I progress. So we started with 4 or 5 days a week here, which was already a lower frequency for what I was used to. But then went down to 3. I saw, okay, progress is going well. 2, even better. Fully recovered in every session normally, depending on the chores, obviously. But I also noticed, for example, that the more active my day is before a deadlift session, so the more labor I have done before the actual session, the better the lifts are, due to not being in a sedentary position, getting stiff-ish, having issues of reaching the perfect starting position. So the more manual labor, like medium intensity or low intensity manual labor I had before a session, the better was the lifting outcome.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and I obviously had to, like, my switch from the very high frequent full body training towards a lower frequency was due to 2 ACL tours. I had one on the left shoulder, one on the right shoulder, both from bike accidents within 2 months. So it's taking you out a little, obviously. And I did switch to 3 days a week of strength and 3 days a week of yoga at that point. So I always had yoga, strength, and that has given me the best progress in strength training at that point of my life, because of the improvements in flexibility and stabilization muscles. It's just a world difference. I wouldn't say this is particularly the best thing for building muscle if you're just wanting to build muscle and size. But in terms of strength and improvement of lifts, I think the low frequency is definitely a way to go.
And the increases that you're seeing and the improvements, is that in the weight in which you're lifting, or is that aesthetically, or a mixture of both?
I don't have a big focus on aesthetically. I always like to aim for this, but it's never the reason for me training. I have been training for looks for a long time. It's equally important to me, but I got the best results in terms of looks from focusing on actual numbers that are tangible and measurable. So the increases that I'm seeing are in numbers, especially in the deadlift region. I mean, it's probably an ego game. I wouldn't recommend it to any athlete to deadlift if they don't do it for the deadlift reason. But I do like it as a measure of strength and a measure of capability to get into a efficient position to actually lift the weight. So that has been increasing a lot due to the farm work.
That is so interesting, that combination. So then, just lastly, if someone listening to this wanted to buy a farm in Norway, what do you think that they should be aware of before they did it?
Well, just one major thing: you need to migrate to Norway before you're buying land. You can buy vacation homes. I think as a foreigner, that shouldn't be a big deal. But in vacation homes, you're not allowed to live permanently. So there are some farms that are registered as vacation homes, despite having land. It depends a little on the region where they are and the attractiveness of the region. But if they would like to have a farm as a permanent home, then migration needs to come first to be able to even bid on a farm. If you are non-EU citizen, you better be ready for a lot of hassle to migrate here if you are not a skilled worker. Skilled workers have a bit of an exception. So if you do have a PhD, at least a master's degree in something, and you do get a job, it's still a decently easy process. But as I told you earlier, with self-employment, you need to
prove a very, very substantial amount of cash that you are having to maintain yourself, and contracts.
Tell us the numbers.
Yeah, you better not quote me on that, but the last thing I heard was a revenue of $150,000 within the first 3 months of entering the country, and then a continuous $250,000 annually, year after year, with the option of the government to send you back if you do not reach these numbers. Well, better check up yourself, but that was the last thing I heard for non-EU residents.
Well, maybe that might put a few people off.
I think it does. Norway is actively trying to avoid unnecessary migration to the country, or immigration. If you're an EU citizen, things are much easier, and if you're young, just come here to study. It's the easiest way into any country. It was the easiest way to move to Denmark. It was the easiest way to get anywhere.
Well, go to study, do the till method. Go to study, stay there, buy a farm, and then you get to go.
Yeah, it has been a long process there, but at least my degrees are used for something. I have no much use for them apart from that, but it is still an option for self-employed people if they are Europeans. It just excludes much of the rest of the world.
Amazing. Well, Till, if the audience want to keep up to date with you, see a bit of imagery behind what you've been saying, where would be the best place for them to find you?
Well, in every platform, pretty much, it's just my name, which is Till, and Darling as the surname. It's Daling, on which I got a few comments to in my life. On all platforms: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Same platform.
Amazing. Well, thank you, mate. I appreciate your time and for coming onto the show.
Nothing to thank for.